Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Back with another classic 80s movie review for you. Today I'm going to be taking a look at 1981's Excalibur. Directed by John Boorman, a director that I'm not all that familiar with. The only other really big movie he did that I recognized was Deliverance. I am familiar with his son though, Charlie Boorman. Charlie actually has a small part in this film as Arthur's illegitimate son. And I know Charlie from The Long Way Down and The Long Way Round, the motorcycling documentaries that he did with Ewan McGregor a couple of years ago, which I reviewed on this channel a while back. I'm a big fan of swords and sorcery, love the Lord of the Rings movies, Willow as well, love in Game of Thrones. There's a lot of bad, magical, medieval movies out there, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by Excalibur. I remember seeing this as a kid a long time ago, and it was a little too adult-oriented for my young mind to really appreciate it at the time. I was more into the action at the time, and this is a very slow-paced, artistic type of movie. It is a retelling of the legend of King Arthur, but looking back on this movie right now in 2018, I was able to appreciate this a lot more than when I originally tried to watch it in the 80s and then any subsequent viewings maybe in the 90s or after that. There's so many old legends that are getting rebooted, and I feel as though the essence, the purity of the story is being diluted by modern things such as social justice, feminism, forced diversity. And there was a King Arthur movie a while, not too long ago actually, that had those issues. Even going back to the Sean Connery and Richard Gere movie, that was, again, more of a modern update of the Legend of King Arthur. What I liked about this movie is that it didn't feel like a typical Hollywoodized legend. What this actually felt more like to me was a biblical story. It didn't have a perfect beginning, middle, end with a denouement and a happy ending. This particular telling of the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is a cautionary tale, and I appreciated that. Now, I have a caution of my own for people who are interested in this movie. This is not the best looking movie, and it is not the best sounding movie. This is a movie that is very rough around the edges. It almost seems like a low-budget movie. By today's standards, I guess you would relate it to being a low-budget or a student film. But what kept me watching it is the ingenuity, the in-camera ingenuity. I really loved a lot of the lighting tricks that they did in this movie. Excalibur is a magical sword, and they take every opportunity they can to shine a spotlight literally on the sword so that it gleams in the lens. And they also do some lighting tricks where there's this green glow that not only the sword catches, but a lot of the knight's armor catches it, some of the settings. Even in the forest, you see this unnatural green lighting, this green glow around things. And I thought that added to the mystical, magical quality of the film. So in an age of movies with so much CGI and even past the CGI, post-production lighting, tweaking, filters, things like that. I really appreciated a movie that actually did all of its lighting on set in order to achieve that otherworldly feel to it. Most of the actors in this I didn't recognize, with the notable exception of Sir Patrick Stewart, who plays the father of Guinevere, and it was wild seeing him in this a couple of years before Star Trek The Next Generation, although he looks exactly the same other than the beard. Sir Patrick Stewart has always looked that age that he is, but it was very cool seeing him not playing Jean-Luc Picard or Professor X. Both characters are very similar. In this one, he is rambunctious, he is rowdy. We all know that Patrick Stewart is a fantastic actor, so it was really cool just seeing him on a horse with his sword and screaming. And he actually reminded me a lot of King Theoden from Lord of the Rings or King Leonidas from 300. So if you're a Patrick Stewart fan, although he doesn't have a huge part in this movie, I would recommend it just for that, just to be able to see Patrick Stewart, being raw and more intense than he's ever been. As far as the story goes, it can feel a little, how did we get from here to there? There is a part in the story, for people who don't know the legend of King Arthur, I'm not going to give it away for you, but there is one part in particular where the kingdom hits some hard times. And this being a magical, mystical story, the belief was that the king was a representative of God, or was imbued with the power of God, that he was a holy divine figure. He wasn't just some schmuck who was born to a king and queen and inherited his power. So when the king falls on hard times, the land falls on hard times. And the one thing that I thought was kind of strange was his solution to this is, go find me the Holy Grail. And that is, I guess, in keeping with the legend, but in terms of a movie that you're watching, a story unfold, it was out of left field. Like, why all of a sudden do you want this Holy Grail? It hadn't really been mentioned before, but that's the way the legend goes, and that's how this movie goes. It really does feel more like a legend than a film that follows a screenplay. So any other year that might have bothered me a lot more, but in 2018, I appreciate it a lot more because it didn't feel like it was following that corporate checklist in order to please the greatest audience possible. I also thought it was biblical in the sense that things just keep repeating themselves. King Arthur himself, as a young man, is a virtuous character, but he is born into the world through an act of horribleness, and he gets a son as well, kind of through the same way. Not really because he is a terrible person, but it's just because horrible things keep happening to this person. And it's interesting to see these themes recurring not in a trilogy, but in the movie itself over a long course of time. There's another thing I appreciated about the movie, that we are becoming so conditioned to accepting the only time we ever get to see a character grow from youth to old age is in a trilogy, or in a 6-part saga or 9-part saga. So much of movies today is all about not selling you on just the movie, but selling you on the franchise. They want to hook you for a decade. And I like that this was a telling of King Arthur's tale from the time he was a youth, encountering Excalibur in the stone, all the way to his redemption in his old age. No prequel required, no sequel required, just a really nice self-contained story. So if you're a fan of medieval movies, sword and sorcery, and especially 80s movies, I would recommend checking out Excalibur. Got a comment? Scroll down and go to town. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmas Day. Our dairy!